Quando você ouve um podcast, está procurando entretenimento ou conhecimento, certo? E se você procura por desempenho e qualidade para o seu veículo, qual a sua escolha? Os amortecedores Motorcraft têm tecnologia Ford e oferecem uma condução suave para uma viagem tranquila e segura. Escolha a confiabilidade dos amortecedores Motorcraft, válidos para a linha K, Fiesta, EcoSport e muito mais. Quando terminar seu podcast, é só acessar a loja da Ford no Mercado Livre e experimentar a diferença.
Rocky Mountain Bicycles is turning 40 this year, and to celebrate, the brand is giving Singletracks listeners a chance to win one of 5 limited edition prize packs. Visit singletracks.com/RockyMountain40 by August 31st, 2021, and enter your name and a valid email address to be considered. 1 entry per person, no purchase necessary, and void where prohibited. Click on the show notes for a link to the contest page and to get more information. Happy anniversary, Rocky Mountain. This episode of the Singletracks podcast is sponsored by Rocky Mountain. Hey everybody, welcome to the Singletracks podcast. My name is Jeff, and today we're going to be talking about Rocky Mountain Bicycles. Well, the brand officially got its start in 1981, and this year the innovative brand is celebrating its 40th anniversary. In that time, Rocky Mountain has produced countless innovations and firsts, and their sponsored athletes have won races on all of the world's biggest stages. Today, Dre, Hester, and Stephen Matthews are joining me to talk about the brand's history and to look to the future. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jeff.
Well, take us back to the beginning, Stephen. How did Rocky get its start?
In the late 1970s, before the term mountain biking really existed, there was basically an owner and a couple of his friends that were riding, and they worked in a shop here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And they basically found that the bikes that were available at the time just weren't up to snuff for how they wanted to ride. So, they wanted to push it off road. They wanted to start taking cuts through the park and riding on rougher terrain. And things were just basically breaking in half.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Yeah. So what they decided to do was they basically started kind of cutting up bikes and re-welding them to be stronger in different ways. And it became successful enough that the customer response started to grow, and their friends wanted them, and it just grew really, really organically. So that was in the late 70s, and by 1981, the original owner, his name's Grayson Bain, he registered the company, and Rocky Mountain Bicycles was born.
Yeah. And the company, this was early days for mountain biking, and the company started out really as a mountain bike brand, right?
It did. Yeah. Like I was saying with the chopping up bikes and chopping up 10 speeds to make them more adaptable for rougher terrain. It started with the desire of riding off-road. So Rocky Mountain is pretty cool in the sense of it really was one of the first true mountain bike companies.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Dre, tell us about the brand's first production bike, the Sherpa. How much did that bike sell for back then, and who was sort of the target rider for a bike like that?
Well, it's funny that you ask. That was a long time ago, and that even predates me, believe it or not. The Sherpa was kind of a duet.
Hopefully you've done your homework and you can fill us in.
I honestly missed that part of the I think it was somewhere around $800. It was, which was a lot of money back then for this, as a mountain bike. What are these mountain bike things? But that bike has kind of stayed within the line in and out. It's always been an adventure bike that takes people in the true spirit of mountain biking out to explore in your backyard. And I think they really kind of nailed it. The name speaks volumes to what mountain biking gives all of us. You've got that Sherpa experience out in the mountains. And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, for sure. Well, unlike a lot of brands, and, Rocky Mountain has grown a ton over the years, but despite getting bigger and bigger and, adding all kinds of bikes to the line, the brand's really stayed true to its roots as a mountain bike and an off-road brand. What does that mean in terms of like the corporate culture there? What's it like working at Rocky Mountain, Stephen?
I think, it's kind of, we wear our hearts on our sleeves. I think it's exactly what we expect. Everybody here loves riding bikes and the culture of mountain biking. We actually have 2 offices. Our head office is in St. George, Quebec. And out there, we've got our executive team and our finance team and HR and our electrical engineering team and some of the customer service and warehousing. And then the R&D center is still in in Vancouver here. We're actually located in North Vancouver. And that's where our marketing team, our R&D team, some of our customer service, and then also our product team works out of. And, I think, like you mentioned, we've grown a ton, and having the 2 offices across Canada has helped facilitate that growth, both for shipping and receiving product, strategic positioning across the country, and how we can service the world. But really the heart of loving to ride our bikes in our backyard on Vancouver's North Shore is alive and well. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be part of that. I love riding bikes, and I ride with the guys and girls that work here as much as we possibly can. So we're very lucky to have as many trails and the quality of trails that we do right in our backyard.
Yeah. And what about you, Dre? You're based in BC, aren't you? What does that mean to be sort of immersed in that culture? I mean, that's arguably one of the main, the heart and soul really of mountain biking. I mean, that's where a lot of innovation comes from, a lot of progression in riding and trails and all that. I mean, what does that mean to be a part of that, and how does that filter into Rocky Mountain?
Yeah, some people call BC sort of the mecca of mountain biking, and I think it's just a byproduct of people who love biking, and we've had road cycling here forever. But the mountains are our backyard, and being that mecca. I grew up in Victoria, which is just across the pond. I live in North Shore, North Vancouver right now, and after racing World Cups and this Victoria is sort of where Alison Sider, Jeff Kabush, Ryder Hejidal, Roland Green. It's a real cross-country, technical, great hills to ride in. But eventually I got a bit bored of that, and the North Shore called to me. The wild, gnarly ladder bridges and the evolution of a riding style that, you cut your teeth on hills, and even the East Coast of the U.S. has some pretty aggressive terrain. But once you layer in that vertical snow-capped peaks to the base, and a lot of my friends are from Ontario, or they've moved out from Quebec, and they're here. We're all here for the same reasons. And that's really what the company culture is that passion for cycling and getting a bit gnarly, is really what drives all of us to be here. So we share that on a daily basis. We're yakking about what trail you rode. We all default to different groups. We try to ride together. But at the end of the day, the conversations multiple times a day. What trail were you riding? Oh, what bike you on? How's it? Oh, I had a flat tire. This sucks. That's great. Good condition now. Oh, bony. It's getting summer and dry. So that really is underpinning to the entire company is love the ride, passion for 2 wheels, and getting out there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I have very much a similar story of I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, so front range of the Rockies, but basically on the prairies. And my older brother and I were, addicted to mountain biking at a young age. And a lot of the things that Rocky Mountain was putting out there in the early 2000s with Wade Simmons and the free ride movement, all that, we really latched onto. And it was a huge motivator for moving from Alberta to British Columbia, was the mountain bike culture. And fortunately, I landed myself in the heart of it here. So,
Yeah. And I mean, that obviously that really shows people who are passionate are going to do their best work at designing bikes and pushing the envelope and, really figuring out like this works, this doesn't work. Like, how can we make this better? And I think that's really clear by looking at the bikes that Rocky Mountain has put out over the years. So sticking sort of back in history in the 90s, Rocky Mountain actually started the component brand Raceface, and a lot of people are familiar with Raceface today. How are the two companies related now? I know you guys share a race team together, and so Dre, tell us a little bit about sort of that relationship.
Well, I'll give you the start of it because I was actually there when it began, and then Stephen can take it where it's evolved to because it really is a great relationship. So back in the day, I think it was around 95 or 96, Rocky Mountain wanted to kind of create a component side. And so they brought in a few CNC machines. And they actually started with soft goods, which funnily enough, they put on the athletes. And we had plaid short sleeves and T-shirts, and the whole race face was kind of spawned. And then they moved into cranks and handlebars and stems. And it's not the only company that has come out of Rocky. As you know, we like to talk about the Rocky Mountain family tree because Synchros, originally the two fellows who started that, worked at Rocky. DeKerf was an incredibly famous welder. He started his own company. He was coming out of there. So we've had a few other offshoots, but Raceface being one of our more prolific children.
Yeah.
But eventually they grew big enough that they wanted to fly on their own. And that was when they sort of separated the saucer sections. And in the short and long of it, we've always maintained that these other siblings or the kin of Rocky Mountain, we always try to tell that story that, you know, because of, you know, the filial relationships that we have, that we try to spec the product with Raceface, which then extends to kind of where our EWS team and our teams are at with current situation. In which case, I'll hand it to you, Stephen, to pick up that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dre. Yeah, basically, we've always had a great relationship with Raceface, and there's been crossover over the years pretty consistently, just in different ways. So some of our freeriders, like Wade Simmons, have ridden for Raceface forever. And so there's just been a really natural tie between the two brands to stay in touch after we split apart to be two different companies. And so when we were putting together a race program, which Dre was very involved with, and now I manage and run, you know, we kind of looked at who's in our own backyard and how do we make a team that not only can win and be really successful in a pure racing standpoint, but is interesting, has a great history. We can kind of harp on our Canadian roots and have a bit of a theme within the racing atmosphere that people globally can pay attention to. So working with Raceface has been great. Our team runs their soft goods as well as the components on the bike. So things like handlebars, stems, wheels. And it's honestly been a lot of fun to work with them on the project.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, speaking of racing, Dre, you actually raced for Rocky Mountain at the 96 Olympics in the inaugural mountain bike event. So we've got the Olympics coming up, or I guess by the time this airs, they will have just passed. But tell us, what was that like being there at the first mountain bike Olympic event?
Well, you know, the Olympics are what they are. They are an incredible crowning achievement to any athlete's palmars. I was coming up through the ranks from provincial state racing to national level racing. And I kind of landed on the international scene early in 96 with a Cactus Cup win. Mm-hmm. If there was one person who I ever admired, it was John Tomac. So I did beat him and Henrik Journies. And those were kind of my peers, which was a really incredible arrival for me to get onto the podium with those guys. Later that year, everybody was trying to qualify for the inaugural mountain bike arrival at the Olympics. So I was fortunate enough to be on my game, young 26-year-old, maybe just a little older than Matthew Vanderpool, but you know, still feel like I had some heat in the leg, and it was incredible. Yeah. My honestly funniest moment is my dad and my parents kind of poo-pooed this whole mountain bike thing. Like, oh, you're just a surf bum. You're just borrowing our cars, borrowing our money to go to these mountain bike races. But when you kind of give them hey, I just got selected to the Olympic team. It was kind of like a head whipped around, and suddenly you had validated this entire experience of being a surf bum or a skateboarder. And it made it real. And it made it real for the whole industry. That mountain biking, because it was kind of a fad back then. Yeah, where's this fad going to go? Sure, it's kind of cool, but is it really here to stay? And I think that was a really big moment. It sort of predated the freeride movement, which then continued to evolve the sport. But yeah, when you arrive at the Olympics, the world notices and they see you as a true sport. And that was being part of that first wave, that inaugural acceptance of mountain biking as a world-class sport was pretty special. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Which bike were you riding in the race?
Well, we were, I thought full suspension back then was not efficient, too heavy. So everybody, I think, absolutely was on a hardtail. So it was the Vertex, which I rode, probably straight for a decade. And my back is still suffering from it because I won't get on a hardtail anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understandable. Well, Stephen, tell us about some of the other more recent sponsored athletes' performances that stand out to you over the years. Obviously, Rocky Mountain sponsors a number of different athletes in a number of different mountain bike disciplines. So which ones to you are kind of your favorites over the years?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, we've been involved with the whole sports marketing, professional athlete side of things for many years, like over 30 years. But it's changed disciplines over the years, through the 90s and the stories that Dre was just talking about with the Olympics and things. We were huge into cross country. Mm-hmm. And, you've got Alison Sidor winning the first World Cup aboard a Rocky Mountain in 92. And then you fast forward to the 96 Olympics, you've got Dre Hessler, with his Cactus Cup win and the Olympics. Was that 96, Dre?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 96.
All right, look at that. And then, moving kind of shifting gears away from cross country a bit, perhaps, Wade Simmons won the inaugural Red Bull Rampage, which is so far from cross country racing, you can't get much.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool to see, Rocky Mountain take a step in a completely different direction. I think we'll probably touch on that a little bit more later, but take a step in a different direction and do really well at it from the get-go. And that legacy continued. Guys that were still sponsoring, like Thomas Vanderham, competed in, I think he's told me 10 years of Red Bull Rampage contests at least. There was a while there where he competed in every single one, which is super impressive. And then in more recent years, we've switched disciplines again to support enduro racing. And we had Jesse Melamed win at home in Whistler, British Columbia, an Enduro World Series race. And since then, he's been back up top of the podium in the first place position twice. We do still exist in the cross-country world, but not necessarily in the World Cup ranks. We're more focused on multi-day stage events. And guys like Felix Burke have taken the win at the BC Bike Race, which is a event here that Dre's involved with, that we've been partnered with for many, many years. So it's been interesting to watch it evolve. Some of those dates I mentioned are before I was really involved with cycling, but working here, I've had an opportunity to look back at some of those, and it's super impressive. And the things I do remember, like from the early 2000s on, are it's cool to be a part of those. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, you mentioned Red Bull Rampage, and Freeride actually is part of the Rocky Mountain heritage. And the brand was sort of there from the beginning. I mean, in 97, you guys signed Richie Schley, Wade Simmons, and Brett Tippie. Later, they became known as the freeriders, I think, based on an ad that you guys put out, right? That had them wearing wigs. So, Dre, what was it about these guys and Freeride in particular that was so compelling for Rocky Mountain to get involved and to sponsor them and to really promote this new sort of style of mountain biking?
Oh, it's a funny question, because I was still sort of head deep in the cross country world, and then as I was getting a little older, we started to work with the whole team, from the downhill, the cross country, and the freeriders. And Wade had, it's a long story, but he'd gone from wheel building at Rocky in the factory to racing some downhill Canada Cups. And then he was kind of like, oh, this racing stuff, I just want to ride my bike. And then they started working with photographers. And I know from, I had the, good fortune to meet these fine fellas and spend a lot of time with them. And now we're all fast friends. But it was really Richie who came along, and they kind of have this Kamloops connection between Wade and Tippie and Richie. And Richie gave the professional, he was chasing the covers of the magazines as a skier. And Wade would say, enough of the racing. This is ridiculous. I want to ride. And that was kind of how they grew the movement. Freeride was about showing the expression of the style of riding and the amplitude, and it was progressing so naturally in Vancouver with these ladder bridges that I think they just took the fun factor of riding and they really put that on the covers of the magazines. And I think that's where, cross country, for all intensive purposes, is, you're in the pain cave for a long time. And it's not for everybody. And,
right.
And these guys put the fun and the style into what mountain biking is. And I think that's where their success really came from. And they were getting sued at the time by some unknown company for the word free ride, because someone tried to, what do you call it?
Trademark it. Yeah.
Trademark that. So that's where they came out with the Fro Ride. And it was kind of like, let's poke. It's more fun. We'll just keep poking fun at everything because this sport is challenging. It's terrifying. It's hard, but it's fun. And that's why we do it. So I think what really resonated for everybody was these guys are hilarious. Then Wade launches over the Marzocchi truck and they're amazing athletes. So that kind of just, I think, really echoed with everybody. Like, they're having fun. They're doing cool stuff. Then they took it on the road and they started traveling to different parts of the world, where you can see the kids connecting with these athletes, not from the race results perspective, but really from just what they stood for was good style, good times, good fun.
Yeah. Well, and freeriders, I mean, they're continuing to push the envelope in terms of like style and the tricks that they're able to do. How does that like filter back into bike development as well? I mean, is that something that Rocky Mountain is able to capitalize on and use in the different bikes that you guys are working on, Stephen?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things when we go to design a bike, and I'm speaking not as a bike designer, but as a guy who works for the brand on the marketing side. But there's the needs of somebody competing at the highest level of racing or the highest level of free riding are much different than you or I, or I mean, Dre's up there, but
right.
That limit. So there's certain needs that they're after, but the ability for them to push product to the limit and live on that leading edge, it kind of shows the lines to stick between, and then depending on how you want your product to feel, respond, ride, take it back a notch or move it in half the direction or whatever. We're really fortunate that I mentioned Thomas Vanderham's name a little bit earlier as a free rider who's competed in many, many Rampage contests. He's one of the most well-known free riders in the world, and he's ridden for us for a long time. And over the years, he's progressed his role, and he's still very involved from a sports marketing athlete side, but he's also super involved with our R&D team. So he actually comes in for weekly meetings. He's really involved with everything from early prototyping and concepting straight through till finally there's a production test mule to ride. And it's his feedback that we definitely take into consideration as the more expert level of who's going to be riding these bikes. So when we go to design a bike, we have people of different abilities ride it, and because they're going to come up with different responses of what they feel for the product. And he represents that true core, very high level riding, which as you and I know, there's a lot of great riders out these days. There's a ton of new riders, and there's also a lot of people that with progressive technology and better bike trails than we've ever had ride at a very high level. And so we're very lucky to have Thomas here helping us speak to that market.
I think it's, to add to that, I think it's really interesting how different athletes segue their knowledge bases into regular work. And while I've never been as technical, on the feel and the sensitivity of the angles of a bike, it's really the way Thomas's mind works, that he tries things, he looks at things. So we're very fortunate to have Thomas working with the R&D team and bringing that expertise, but his mind really thinks like that as an engineer. And then, we talked about Wade. Wade's gone to the sales team. He's the stoke master. He's out there pumping the dealers up. And I've come to the marketing team. I like, working with Stephen on, getting people stoked on the ride and true out their experiences. But again, back to Thomas, like, it's just the way his mind works that he can translate that experiential feeling of a different angle, different degrees, different shock settings, and relate that to the engineers. And they build. It's just a huge kudo to Rocky to have a guy like that working with our developers.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, Dre, when you were describing sort of how Freeride got started and what those guys were doing, they were just out there, like you said, having fun. They weren't necessarily racing or competing initially. It made me think of trail riding. I mean, that's kind of how we describe trail riding today. And that's obviously a huge part of the market. That's where most of the folks who are listening to this podcast are, seeing themselves as they ride for fun. They look for trail bikes that are comfortable, that are going to perform well. And, it sounds like free riders like Thomas Vanderham, like he's able to translate that. There isn't a big market for free ride bikes, right? I mean, not many brands are still making those, but, it sounds like surprisingly there's a good translation between free ride and what most of us are trying to do today, which is just have fun.
Well, we actually call it free ride light, and that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
Wheels in the air, a couple feet off the ground, and then there's progressive, and then watching the next generation come in. That's the 8 to 12-year-olds now, and then there's the 12 to 18s. Like now they have access to all the bike parks out there, the coaches, and bar none, the incredible equipment that's come to service all of those experiences. And I think to go from where I started with toe clips, rigid bikes, and 6 speeds, and terrible cantilever brakes, pre-V brakes, and then to see what my kids, I got a couple of an 8 and a 12-year-old, and they've just got these disc brakes, full suspension bikes. You're like, oh my God, like this industry right now is so fortunate. And the next generation, this generation of bikes to ride, and you're absolutely right. It's kind of like there's a little free ride in all of us, and we call that trail.
Yeah, that's great. Well, seems like Rocky Mountain has been one of the first to introduce a number of things over the years. And I've always been fascinated with the fact that you guys are bikes.com. Like, does anybody know how that happened? Were you guys like the first bike company on the internet?
Well, it's interesting. And Stephen was like, we were just chit-chatting about I don't know anything about how this happened. And there is a guy, and his name was Craig Pollock, and he was very involved with Raceface and getting Raceface. He was the general manager, actually the first guy to hire me to Rocky Mountain. And then when he was involved with Raceface, he helped separate that over to becoming their own company. And he went on to work with a lot of athletes and a lot of movies. But at somewhere along that, that incubation of, hey, there's this thing called the internet. And you're like, what? What's the internet? What? And, he was just a forward-thinking guy, and he just had the opportunity to grab bikes.com. And I think we probably sat on that for, a good 4 or 5 years before it came to fruition that, you don't need to do those paper catalogs anymore, that boxes and boxes of them arrive, hundreds of thousands of dollars of glossy pictures wrapped into a catalog and send to bike stores.
Right.
The internet can save the environment. We can transfer information, and lo and behold, that's I like to give credit where credit's due. That was Craig Pollock's acquisition, bikes.com.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, yeah, another first for you guys, or you guys were among the first to introduce a 27.5 trail bike. That was almost 10 years ago. So how was the brand able to react so quickly to that new wheel size? And is the brand like, do you guys feel like you're good at taking risky bets, or did it not seem risky at the time?
Can I start with that one, Stephen? The beauty, sorry, buddy. The beauty of Rocky's always been a kind of a small company. While we walk big and we have lots of great athletes and we've incredible bikes, we're actually quite a small, nimble company. And to have that R&D facility that we've had for, actually forever, we've been manufacturing bikes. Bikes went overseas. We did all the R&D. We built all our mules in-house. We've always tested them on the North Shore. So to have the ability to be a medium, small-sized company with a nimble production R&D facility, that's what enabled us to try different things. And because we have such core values here, to believe in what's going on and what we're doing. So I don't know that we're a risk-taking company per se, as we're not afraid to try things. And if we believe it will make riding better, we'll pursue it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Stephen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Dre hit the nail on the head with the idea of trying things and willingness to maybe look beyond what's right in front of our nose. And I think it comes from having the right people at the company and passionate people that are out there riding their bikes. And in this case, they were at the time riding 26-inch wheels on our backyard trails on very demanding, famous trails. And this idea of 27.5, which helped in certain ways, came around. And it's like, okay, well, let's make this in-house. Let's rip out the backyard trails that we all know really well and are truly great for testing bikes. And you see the benefits right away. And so it was an opportunity taken by having great access and the right people involved.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense too, that for mountain bikers, progression it's like a core value. And it sounds like that's a core value at Rocky as well, in terms of always trying to try new things and get better and see what works and what doesn't work. Today, we're seeing the 27.5 wheels on smaller frames and then 29er wheels on larger sizes. And the Altitude from Rocky Mountain is one of the bikes that's set up that way. What do you guys think about the tweener wheel size? Is this kind of, we finally found the ideal use case for the smaller frame sizes, or are there other opportunities still out there for 27.5 as well?
Yeah, I think, the way that we've done it is at the time, like you mentioned with Altitude and Current Instinct as well, where the smaller sizes feature 27.5 wheels. And as you move up, in a couple of our bikes, we have a crossover. So like, as an example, you can buy an Altitude size medium frame as a 27.5 bike or a 29 bike. That crossover in Instinct is in size small. But the point being that we're using the 27.5 wheels for better standover. In certain regards, we actually have, like in our extra small Instinct, we actually have a different frame silhouette to increase standover still. So the way that we are currently using 27.5 wheels versus 29 is basically to give riders, no matter what size they are, the best ride experience possible. So, someone who's 5'2", there's definitely disadvantages of running a 29-inch wheeled bike. It's harder to handle. You just have less leverage with shorter limbs, all that kind of stuff. And so it's really this kind of idea of maintaining proportions, whether you're 5'2" or 6'4", and that's the way that we're doing it now. So I think it's a good theory, and by adapting our frames to do that across our size, it's allowed us to serve the riding market better. I think that's how we're doing it. You can see how other people are using it. Obviously, the explosion of mullet bikes in downhill racing and even starting to come into some trail things shows that other brands see a use for it in a different way. So I don't think the tweener wheel is going away anytime soon, because I think we're starting to see different uses for it than just 27.5 with trail bikes.
Yeah, I think I just add to that, and I think that these are all tools. What we're learning in our progression is that there are tools at our disposal, and that we shouldn't poo-poo any of them. And I don't want to mitigate or minimize what Stephen says, because I'm going to talk about kids' bikes, and that's not like saying that's an answer for 27.5. Because I also have quite a short wife, and when you want that standover, pretty important that you get the max amount of clearance when you're going over A-frames and teeter-totters, roots, rocks, and drops. So to have a bike that fits. But migrating an 8-year-old through 24, 26, 27, 29 wheels, when you can mullet, change, even mullet up and change, we've only really arrived in the kids market in the last, my kid's 11 and a half now, and I was scared when he was 2 or 4. There was nothing in the market of anything competent enough to handle the North Shore where we ride. So I've used it as a tool for many different applications within a kid's bike, as 24, 24, 6, 26, 26, 26, 27, and then 27, 27, 27, 29. And that idea of mulleting, it's just, what's your style of riding? We have a tool if you want to ride this way or that way, or you need more standover. At the end of the day, how can we get you out there for the best experience possible?
Yeah.
Do you think, after hearing that, do you think Dre's raising a family of mountain bikers, or is there any confusion on that?
Yeah, no, none at all. And I mean, that's great perspective too, because you hear a lot of, mountain bikers, core riders, they seem confused, right? They're like 27.5, I thought that was the thing. And now you're telling us it's 29er, but hearing your perspective, it's clear that this is all about progression, right? I mean, nobody knows what's going to work. And, we're constantly trying new things. And we tried 27.5 and it worked really well. And then we were like, wait a minute, this works well for certain riders, but other riders, we can do something a little bit differently and we can customize. And Rocky Mountain has been doing that throughout its history. And, the other thing, Dre, when you were talking about your crazy wheel size swaps, was making me think of the Ride 9 system as well, where you're able to tweak the bike to get it exactly the way you want it, because we all ride differently. We all progress in our riding as well. I mean, you buy a bike, you're at one level, but then you ride it for a little while, a year later, hopefully you're at another level. And so, yeah, that's a really great perspective, I think.
Yeah, I think it's versatility, and we have to push out from our myopic view of North Vancouver and think about, where do other people ride and what's their style of riding. And we're all believers in N+1, but that's us as hardcore industry guys. We got a garage full of bikes, right? So, but certain years you're focused on pedaling and fitness, and for me, I'm always working on my jump prowess so I can catch up to Wade and Richie, but that's never going to happen. So maybe I'm going to wave in a dirt jumper, and that's got a different set of requirements for what I want to add to my progression. But if you're trying to get one person if they're in that one bike does it all, they're going to need a lot of different tools at their disposal to get it to fit them. And that's we'll go back to the Ride 9 chip. And that's where you can really customize, and not, these are just tweaks and tunes to help that person get their riding style maximized for where they live. And I think that's pretty important these days.
Yeah. And I mean, we look back to the start of Rocky Mountain. I mean, the whole idea was to build a bike that can ride off road. I mean, if people just said like, yeah, one bike can do it all, I mean, we wouldn't have mountain bikes. So it's a great point. So I want to ask you guys about your personal favorite Rocky Mountain bike. Could be a current bike or a former one that was in the lineup. What's a bike that, like, Stephen, for you is like really iconic, like one you're really proud of, or one that really like sort of carries the Rocky Mountain brand the best?
Yeah. I've worked here for 4 years now and gotten to hop on a couple different things. I came from a free ride background, and so really longer travel, more aggressive riding. And as I get older, I start to pedal more and more. And I don't know, one of the coolest things I got to be involved with from working here was jump on our current versions of Slayer and Altitude from an early mule stage straight through to seeing them to now in production. And so when I'm out on the trail and I see somebody rolling around on a current Altitude, I think back when I got to ride, or current Slayer perhaps, when I got to ride an alloy unpainted mule and give my feedback on what I liked. And so I think that one's pretty special to me is our current Slayer 2.9. I spend a lot more time on my Altitude 2.9 than I do on my Slayer, purely just because I ride out the back door, and the Slayer is a bit more of a free ride park focus than a long travel everyday bike. But those are special to me. And as far as Rocky Mountain's history go, I remember being a kid and seeing those green flamed RM7s in the early 2000s, and I never got my hands on one, but I keep looking online to buy one. Don't tell my
Yeah, right on. What about you, Dre? Which bikes stand out for you, and ones that you think, really, really showcase what Rocky Mountain has done?
Well, I think that the Element has to be my favorite bike, because I can think of the transition that I've gone as an athlete through my career or life, and the Element has kind of reflected that. From, I think at one point it was the lightest full suspension bike created with bushings, at which point I was like all into hardtails, and I finally climbed on board and thought, whoa, these things are amazing, to the adventures it's taken me on. BC bike race, Transalp, big events, Trans Andes, like just all over the world on this Element bike that's just built for adventuring and going fast. And that's what I really liked. And eventually, as we evolved into carbon, get this, I slapped a 150-32 Fox on the front, and we were still on 26-inch wheels then, and I was attacking the North Shore on an Element.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had a buddy of mine said, "Oh, Dre, I've never seen you ride so well. You're doing great." I'm like, it's all in the bike. It's the Element. Further to that, I eventually started doing more time on bigger bikes. And I'd have to say that the Instinct, the previous incarnation, the Instinct BC, again, progressed my riding to, I could ride any trail I wanted on this bike. And now the current Instinct kind of represents my style of any trail is possible, any adventure is possible. It's a one bike, do everything for me. So between the Element and the Instinct, which are certainly on the smaller side, I'm absolutely kind of paired well with my life.
Yeah. And either one would probably be a good choice for the BC bike race, right? Is that kind of fit with your thinking? Yeah.
Like if you're, hot shot racer, you're definitely going for the Element, and, it's going to give you a bit more performance for pedaling and a little bit lighter. For the last few years, I've actually been riding an Instinct at the BC bike race because I've kind of taken a back seat to the race and a bit more about just enjoying the 7 days of riding with people. So a bit more travel allows me just to kind of cruise a bit more and enjoy it. But yeah, they're both perfect applications for the BC bike race. But I mean, it's about getting out there and fitting it to your style of riding.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm interested to hear about weird bikes. Are there any like unique or like particularly ones that just totally failed and bombed? Like what are some of those bikes over the years from Rocky Mountain that you guys are aware of?
Oh, weird bikes. I mean, honestly, we have definitely had some weird bikes. Yeah, I was going to say the Suzy Q. I'm actually at our R&D facility in North Vancouver to take this call and looking at one of the original Suzy Q frames, and it was this like, it was called, I think they called it torpedo tubing. So you can imagine it kind of narrowed at the back, kind of like the head of a torpedo missile.
Yeah.
But the thing with the Suzy Q is it had an elevated drive side chainstay, which allowed for a narrower Q factor crank for efficiency.
Okay.
You could run the chain underneath the chainstay instead of over top, like it like. So the result is this crazy tube-shaped bicycle, narrow Q factor and an elevated chainstay. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
And then, I also think about progression of, you mentioned Ride 9 earlier, and some of the ideas of where that came from. There were some bikes, I guess it would be in the late 90s, that had like the ETSX that had a technology called NE3. And it was basically a quick release at the rearward shock mount that allowed you to put the shock in NE3 of any of the three positions, essentially, right? And that adjusted geometry and suspension feel and all that. And so that kind of idea of customizing your ride that Dre touched on earlier has carried forward into, we have Ride 9 now, which is a much more refined system than a quick release on your rear shock, but another kooky bike for sure.
Yeah.
Right. We also, it was crazy when we started, but we talked about straight up geometry, which was getting that seat post up into a steeper angle. And now everybody does it. You have some fancy name for it, a decade ago. And then suddenly it became adopted and you've forgotten about where sort of the idea incubated from, but we're slacking out the head tube, but that makes the climbing tough. So let's just steepen it up. And, that one turned out to be a great idea. So we do try lots of funny things, but for the most part, they don't get farther than the test field out in the backyard.
Right. Or the computer screen. Somebody mocks it up and everybody's like, nope, not doing that. Well, your R&D department worked on the DynaMe e-bike drivetrain system, I'm told, for 10 years. And the brand finally launched its first electric mountain bike in 2017. So, Stephen, can you tell me what makes DynaMe so unique in terms of e-bike drive systems?
Yeah, so, that was obviously a huge project, releasing our first e-bike and not pairing with some of the bigger brands that are currently out there, like a Bosch system or a Shimano system, doing our own thing, which again speaks to our history of how we've always done things with our regular analog mountain bikes, and then now as we go into e-bikes, it's about putting that Rocky Mountain spin on things. And the basic premise was with a Shimano or Bosch system, it is this shape and size, and you essentially have to design the bike around the drive system versus the other way around. Is we wanted to design a bike as we wanted the bike to be and then incorporate the drive system. So, again, making sure that whether we're talking about oh, sorry, I see Dre. He's waving.
No, not you.
Yeah, I was like, time out.
The basic concept of, we want to make sure the bike has that signature Rocky Mountain feel and incorporates the drive system into it. So we worked and developed the DynaMe system, and the one that we launched our bikes with, we launched with an altitude power play, was the third iteration, so DynaMe 3. And the basic idea is that it's a lower RPM motor. So it spins at about 1,200 RPM, which is considerably less than other systems on the market, it means less motor whine, and it's actually more efficient. And then the other thing that we went forward with is it's a really high torque system. So it's 108 Newton meters of torque, which means when you step on the pedals, it's instant response. There's no delay on or off, and there's no mistake you're on an e-bike. It's we have a really powerful motor, and it's also really seamlessly natural feeling because of the way the power is applied. So there's no pause once you stop pedaling. There's no delay in it turning off, and so it makes a really nice bike. Whether you're feathering a climb, trying to like get up and around a technical section, you can kind of nurse the motor a bit, and it just makes for a great thing. So by doing this, making a proprietary design, we're able to use, a standard race face bottom bracket in a frame versus through a drive system like some of the other systems that are out there, and generally just design the bike how we want it versus being handcuffed to how other designs are shaped.
Yeah. Well, with all that torque too, I mean, it sounds like, again, this is the North Shore sort of influencing the design and the product that ultimately comes out, because you guys have super steep trails, a lot of them. And, I've noticed with e-bikes, some of the, more widely used drive systems out there, you still got to put a lot of work into climbing up, especially steep stuff is really going to suffer. And it sounds like DynaMe addresses some of those issues and really makes it for a system that's going to work in places like the North Shore.
Oh, it works everywhere. I was out in Mount St. Anne a couple of years ago for the inaugural. They had the first, it's like something I do a lot. Do the inaugural. Yeah, exactly. If you can do it, anybody can do it. It was
Let
the
Dre
first
try it first.
e-mountain bike World Championships in Mount St. Anne in 2019.
That's good.
And I have to say, I was talked into participating, and at any rate, what I found, and it was a real eye-opener for me too, because I've been, this is a little bit more away from just the technology that Stephen was talking about, which is absolutely awesome, but it's where we embrace the e-bike in our lives as peddlers. And I was riding one once in a while. I got tired. I was short on time. I'd take my e-bike out and I would enjoy it and I would put it away. And I was having a mental battle with, when should I use this? Why should I use this? Should I use this? And so I went to Mount St. Anne, got talked into doing this race. The course designers, Gestev, put on an absolute beauty of a course. It was so steep, so technical, so gnarly, and then you went downhill. So steep, so technical, so gnarly. There was no pretenders allowed out there. And it was like, oh, you can ride your bike like this? Really kind of opened my eyes to really more potential for having fun on the e-bike, not just a short ride, not just a get out with your friends when you're not fit, just having fun on the bike. Again, we'll go back to those free riders. What's it all about? It's to be healthy, to do some forest bathing, to have fun. At any rate, the race was hard. It's a World Cup, and you bury yourself for an hour and 20, and you of course try to keep it upright and not crash. And I did a respectable, I think I was 21st or 22nd. The guy who won was 23. I was 49 at the time. He should always get to the ground by a young guy. But yeah, I was like, for sure. The DynaMe 3 goes uphill like a bat out of hell. The bike is amazing. You pair it up well with the suspension. I mean, that's the kudos to the engineers that match it all up into a seamlessly human feel. But at the end of the day, simply fun and awesome. And what another way to ride your bike and enjoy two wheels.
Yeah. I was going to say, outside of the racing atmosphere, obviously, like, Dre coming from a cross-country background, still pedaling bikes like crazy. I came from more freeride background and have really gotten into pedaling, and I'm not afraid to go for a big ride or still go out and hit some jumps and big hits. But I remember a couple of weeks back, Dre and I took the e-bikes out and went for a big ride on the North Shore. And yeah, it's so much fun. Like, two guys that are perfectly happy riding cross country or, free ride or trail bikes or whatever. You just get on another type of bicycle and it's the same good times, right? So we did this big, chunky, steep climb that, you just fly up, like Dre said, and then the whole way down, you're laughing and having a good time. So it's cool. It's a cool time to be involved with mountain biking because there's just so many different ways to enjoy it.
Yeah. It's just another example of progression of our sport. And, again, Rocky Mountain seeing like these opportunities. First it was off-road and now it's, electric off-road and whatever else is next. So what does the future look like for Rocky Mountain and what are some of the changes? I know you guys can't talk specifically about products or things, but like what are some of the trends maybe that we're all seeing and that you guys are sort of tracking for the future?
We've got our crystal ball out and we're wrapping to see how we can get all the parts and the future, everything organized so we can deliver to everybody who needs bikes in this crazy marketplace.
Yeah.
It's been an overwhelming blanket of, doubt for people, but the bikes are getting out there. More people than ever are riding. I think that's incredible. We're just going to continue to progress along and find things that make riding better, more fun. You going to reveal any secrets, Stephen?
When does this come out? I think you hit the nail on the head again, Dre. This is a really interesting time. The last year and a half for the mountain bike industry has grown like crazy, and really for the first time it's seen exponential growth that isn't with 1 degree of separation of people who are already converted, right? So we've seen more new riders in the last year and a half than ever before. And, part of that's coming from the COVID pandemic and the lack of travel and maybe a bit of extra cash to burn on something. But it's a good time to happen because bikes have never been better and trails have never been better. And the sport's actually a ton of fun. If this had happened 15 years ago when, DH bikes were sketchy and cross-country bikes were uncomfortable and there was no such thing as climbing trails, you had to go up a road first, it wouldn't have seen the same kind of retention. So I think for us, the future of Rocky Mountain is we have a real opportunity with all these new riders who tried and dabbled in a sport, and what's their next bike going to be, and we got to make sure we have something for them. So, we've got a pretty diverse portfolio across our lineup, from cross-country to gravel to free ride to trail to e-bikes, and making sure that we have something for everyone, because hopefully a lot of those people that got to try their bikes for the first time, or some of the people that were already mountain bikers and are into it now more than ever, hopefully we have something for those people.
Yeah. Well, one final question for both of you. I'd like to hear how you could sum up the Rocky Mountain brand in 3 words. I'll start with you, Dre.
Well, I can go all cheesy and throw out the tagline, love the ride.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Love the ride. That's cheating though.
It's not bad. I think passionate 2 wheels, all things off-road, true core values.
That's a lot of 3 words. I think we're up to like 12 now.
Sorry. Hearts one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Steven's got it because he's the marketing guy, so I'm sure he's got it dialed.
Yeah. I mean, as the marketing guy, I'd just default to the marketing slogan. But I would say let's go with innovative, passionate, and let's go Canadian.
Yeah.
Those are my 3 words: innovative, passionate, and Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you guys have the maple leaf features prominently in your branding and marketing as well. And that's obviously a big part of the company, the culture, where you're based, and where really all this progression comes from. It's inspired by the trails and the people that you ride with. So that's awesome. Well, thanks guys for joining me and talking about Rocky Mountain. I've learned a ton about the brand, and yeah, it's really cool to hear the stories behind some of the bikes and to understand sort of where the brand is heading. So thanks. Thanks
a lot for having us, Jeff. It's always good to have a good dance partner who leads us around.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, you can learn more about the Rocky Mountain brand and look through a timeline of their 40-year history on the website at bikes.com. That's all I've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.